Welcome to the dungeon with Harlan and Andrew.
All right, here we are. Welcome. We're going. It is a new year.
Are we live?
We're live.
Are we here?
I don't know if we're muted.
Am I audible?
We'll
Am
find
I
out.
audible?
Yeah, I love audio and I love streaming. It's super easy. I love it.
Digital,
Welcome to the dungeon. I'm audible. New year, new me. I can be heard. Wow, this is huge. This changes everything. What a game changer. Welcome to the dungeon. This is a streaming talk show where we chat with game masters about running games and all things related to tabletop gaming.
It's true.
So thanks for being with us. We have a very special guest this episode, one of my favorite game masters and Asterix friend in real life. I have to admit.
All of the
Dylan
other guests we've ever had on the show, not
Von
Andrew's
Wald.
friend in
there
real
have been
life.
some other friends,
Not
but
Andrew's friend at all. Dylan.
I just want people to that they're like, if they think that I'm
that means a
cheating
lot
or
for you to
something.
admit it in a public forum.
Welcome Dylan Von Wald. Thanks for doing the show. I guess right off the bat, the question we love to ask every game master who has a show: what is your personal history with tabletop role-playing games?
So in like 7th grade, there was a new kid in my middle school, and he introduced it to me. I'd never heard of it before, really, and we went to Black and Red in Arvada. If you've never been there, it's a great store in
Amazing
a lot of ways.
store if you live in Colorado.
Yeah, and I bought these.
It's like an indoor garage sale that has new stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
And I bought these. These are my original 2E
Nice.
D&D manuals. They weren't originally mine. I think, this is somebody's telephone number in there, but they are like the old one. And so we use that, and I still have like my dice from then too.
Let's call that person up right now on the talk show
and
see why they got rid of their 2E D&D manual.
Yeah, James Morgan, we're going to call you at some point on this.
Wow.
James,
amazing.
Our guest next week.
Yeah, and this one has a lovely little happy birthday, Michael, June 6, 1983.
Wow.
Aww.
That's so
Pretty
cool. Michael, you blew
Michael.
it. You gave away one of the best gifts.
Yeah. So I bought those for like $15 or something like that at Black and Red, and just really got hooked from there. I tried finding them, but I drew. I remember I drew a bunch of like monsters for the that had like stat blocks and stuff like that. One of them was my dog. And,
Nice.
I made my dog a D&D monster.
Did any of your friends ever fight it?
Yeah, I think we did.
Did you kill your dog?
No, I think he got away.
Okay. That's what happens when you bring pets into games.
Oh yeah. You gotta warn people.
My friend, I don't know if I talked about this on here, but my friend played a one-shot with me recently, and he played a tabaxi that was his own house pet. Like, it was like designed after his own cat, and he got disintegrated by the boss. And I feel
Oh no!
I did it before I even thought about it, and the look on his face, he's my best friend in the world. Looking at his face, I was like, gosh, I learned something.
That's the second animal I've heard of you disintegrating, Harlan. Your subtitle as a DM is Harlan Kelly, pet disintegrator.
Oh, no way! I've only done that with one, so you're just thinking of
The wolf.
I have
the pet wolf.
Yeah.
The beholder killed a Desiree's pet wolf. Remember in that Coliseum?
You're right. I am the pet disintegrator. This is
pet disintegrator.
Oh boy. Sorry. I've derailed our first episode. Dylan, you started off with the original game. There. Did you play every edition, or did you kind of just go from here to here?
Yeah, so actually, it's funny because right after we bought this was like, I remember 3.0 coming out, which is weird to me now. Like looking back, um, yeah, we ended up switching over to like 3 and then 3.5, and then I have like all the 4E books, and I don't know. I know a lot of people hate 4E. I don't. It's not great, but I DM'd that a lot, and then I really resisted 5E for for a long time because I was like working on my own thing for a while, and I was like, no, I'm not even gonna look at that until I get my own thing done, and then it's been out for like 5 years, and my thing, so.
It's how it goes. It's how it is for me too. I have so many ideas and no time at all. It's weird. Yeah, but so I think I feel like I want to ask you, because you've played all of these editions too. Is I feel like I read on the internet a lot about people having opinions about different editions because like this and that or whatever. Like you said, like people don't like 4E or whatever. But as you weren't playing at the age that you were too, did you find it like difficult to cross over? Did you feel like that frustration of like switching, from like a Mac to PC or whatever? Like, just like having that like form change?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's all D20 based. I mean, obviously, the biggest jump was like 2E to 3, and then everything. I mean, 4 is pretty different with the powers and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
mean, between like 3 and 5, it's pretty. They're pretty. They're all like core mechanic wise, like pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember having like a huge learning curve switching from 2 to 3. And I mean, there was also a time in there where I stopped playing and then came back to 3.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I like that because I feel like every time I read about stuff like that on the internet, I started playing in 5e, so part of this is just like legend or whatever. But I'm like, I can't imagine too many kids out there being like, well, this version is different and I don't like it because of this mechanic there's more minis in this one, or like whatever. I just I feel
I
like
often hear complaints that 5e is too easy, but then it's like, you can make it harder, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a super adjustable system if it's too easy.
Yeah, and 4E was very easy also. But the thing that I did like about 4E was that it was kind of like designed as, it was designed around like a WoW player. Like it would pull people in who had no interest in playing D&D, but it was, it was kind of like built for people who were playing online video games, and I think that made it easier for people who weren't familiar to come into it. And I'm not saying that I think that 5e is necessarily a lot harder, but yeah, I mean, killing players in 5e and also 4e are, if you go by the rules as written, is pretty difficult.
You can just disintegrate them.
You have to want to, I think you have to like want to kill them. Like the enemy has to have the intention of killing them, not just like, okay, they fell down, I'm done, and I'll walk away into the woods now for sure. What direction do you think they'll take with 6th edition whenever that comes around? Do you think they'll go more complex or more simplified?
I'm not sure. I think that's a really interesting question. Because I think that they'll probably ride the 5e high for maybe longer than they initially intended to.
Yeah, it seems to still be charting up.
Yeah, like I think I don't remember how long it took, between 4 and 5e, but Pathfinder outsold 4e stuff, which is pretty funny when you think about it, because Pathfinder is just 3.5. I mean, it's basically like 3.5 just rewritten. So, but I think that they're gonna stick with 5e as long as they can. I don't know how much they'll really. I don't know if they'll change like any core mechanics or not.
I don't think they're ever going to put out a 6e.
Yeah,
I'm serious.
They might not.
I truly don't think they will. They're the biggest fan base they've ever had. They've been putting out things like Xanathars and Tashas where they can just like move it around and stick with it and not create the like rift. Like, I don't think they're ever going to do it.
Yeah, that's
Wow,
a good
yeah.
point because yeah, I mean Tasha's is very interesting because it's almost like a patch. It's almost like a DLC for like a video game, and that
Yeah.
you can like it really is like a map editor,
Yeah.
and kind of like a video game term. Like it gives you so much more, freedom to change around the stuff that I don't know. I mean, I think that they have so much more. I mean, everybody wants an actual like official Spelljammer. Everybody wants official Dark Sun. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it'll be a while before they bring it out.
Yeah.
Interesting. We got it. We have some good questions in chat. I think almost all of them exclusively by Clooney McCroy.
Shout out, Clooney. Thanks for being here. Thanks
This
for
is
supporting.
a good question. I don't think we've ever asked anyone before. What video games have influenced your DMing or your style of running a game?
Man, I think I take like inspiration from like as many of this. I try to like take as many inspiration as from like as many different games as I can possibly. Like there was a time, and I still do it, but um, where I would just play a video game and I couldn't really turn off. Like I would try to think about like how to implement. I'd be, oh, this is a cool mechanic in this video game. How do I like
Yeah.
implement this into my game?
Yeah.
And I couldn't like stop thinking about like how to do new mechanics and stuff like that. I think at one point I tried to like come up with, I thought the like limit break system in like Final Fantasy VII and whatnot was a really cool system. Like what kind of, how would you implement that in a D&D game? Because the limit break, for if you don't know what it is, it's basically like you're fighting and you have this gauge. It's turn-based, right? So for Final Fantasy, like when they implemented it, it was in Final Fantasy VII. And when your character would take damage, their limit break would go up. And so then when they got to like this point where they were like pissed, they could do this like rad special attack. And I was like, man, that's a cool mechanic. Like why can't I do that with my D&D character? Like an attack that only is triggered by
taking damage.
Or I mean,
or being low. Yeah, just like
surprised there's not a barbarian subclass that does that, like a reverse key point system where you build up, and as you amass X amount of these points, you can then trigger like devastating attacks.
Yeah. The blade, oh gosh, what is it? The blade blood maledict that Matt Mercer made does that, where you can sacrifice hit points and like get extra abilities from it by like hurting yourself. And that's how one of the player characters died in Critical Role. It was great.
Man, that's a pretty cool way to go.
Don't know how. So I love that instinct though of like taking, just like having that moment of like watching something and being like, I like this, but I want to play D&D, so I want to take it over there. I find myself doing that all the time with, I don't think anything that cool as what you said. It's more of just like, I like moss people, and I'm like, so I'm gonna make a moss person, but it's less complicated. So.
But it's cool. But then you get to create moss people, and other people can take the moss people out into their own worlds. Pretty dope.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
But I also do that in a really annoying way too, where I'm like watching stuff, and it's like I'm like, oh, that's like a D&D game, or like this would be a good D&D session. I can't watch Mandalorian.
I watch like Castlevania the animated series. If you guys haven't seen that, and I'm like, a cool fight scenario. Like, how could I do this in D&D?
How could I get this feeling in D&D? Totally. Speaking of creating things, I definitely want to chat about this. Dylan, you've been working on your own setting. I guess it's 5e setting now, right? This is called Elegy of Ages, and it's like a whole world to explore. Did you start that back in 4e, or did you start it only?
I did. 5e? Yeah, I started it in 4e, and actually also partially in 3.5, because it started out with like I guess I initially based it on when I was playing a character that I played for a very long time.
How long? How long is very long?
Like, I don't know. I guess very long is relative, but we played it for like 2 years. But we would do it like every. It was me and two of my friends, Brennan and Gian, and my friend Brendan was the DM. So I was a character, and then my friend Gian had his character, and we would go, just like hang out in one of our basements every Monday, and it was like the most consistent board game, or the most consistent game I think that I've had that went for the longest time. But we played from like level 1 to like 15 or something like that, which I haven't. I mean, that's the longest
That's
like
very
level
high. Yeah, I've
jump
never
I've
gotten
done.
that high. Is this a dragonborn named Narzarion?
Yeah, it's
Oh
the
yeah,
dragonborn
somebody
named
in chat
Nazarian.
knows.
Somebody in Chad knows.
So we did like so much with him, and I felt like this world had like history, and so I was like, man, this is the world that we played in. Like it generated its own history based on like our adventures and stuff, and so I started like building a world based on that. And so I started writing it, and then after that I started DMing my own game, and it was 4E, and Devin was in it, and if Jason Wardell was on it. That's actually how I met Jason Wardell.
Wow.
Yeah, and I created a wiki, and we would like update when things would like happen.
That's awesome.
For the thing, because it was like the thing that, and then sometimes the characters in the game I was DMing would like have to face consequences of stuff that my character had done in the other game, and they didn't really know. But it was what I liked about it. I mean, it was kind of, I guess, like I think of it as maybe a little bit like masturbatory now, because it's just like my character. I'm like, oh, look how cool my character was. But and I don't want it to be that, but like what I think was cool about it, for me at least, was that it felt like there was a real history that had like been that these players were in. And then I did another game, and they would reference the events from the previous characters, and it just was like there was a living history to it.
Yeah, because that's
so cool.
That is like a thing that if I was like to, whenever I talk to new DMs or whatever, like one of the tiny little quips I always tell them is like, just make sure your players feel like their choices matter. And I think that when you are in a game referencing another character in that game, then you're like, it makes that other campaign have more weight in this campaign, which then makes that campaign feel like it has more weight. Like you just have that your brain starts rolling of like, well, I'm creating history right now.
Yeah, future players could encounter those ripples totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was huge. I helped out a tiny smidge with it, and it was like such a big world.
You helped out a lot. You helped out a lot.
Just a little, a wee little bit, but yeah, it's super cool, and hopefully it'll come out. We'll have you back on when it's time to launch that, though. But yeah, what would you say? This is kind of like maybe too vague of a question, but as somebody who works on trying to create my own D&D stuff and settings as well, what would you say maybe like the biggest challenge is with creating a whole setting, like a whole world? Like I created a world called the Fringe Company, and all it is like the coastline of a mystery continent, and that was like too big of a scope. But you have created like a whole world map. What do you think? What would you say is the greatest challenge to undertake something like this?
I think my problem is that it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I want there to be like this big, expansive, I want the world to feel like appropriately large and sandboxy, and have like a sampling of different styles. Like the way I was kind of building it was that each city would have its own kind of like theme or genre to it. So like for example, the one that you and I worked on, Andrew, is like the steampunk city. or like the Magitech city, and then I had like an Arabian Nights like kind of theme to it. And my idea was like, well, if you want to go from one genre to another, you don't have to like change your game entirely, because there's a lot of I played with like groups have done that before, where it's like, oh well, we're tired of this game, so we're tired of this like setting, so we're gonna play Deadlands now or whatever. And it's like, but I'm attached to my character. I just can't we just go over to a, I don't know,
city? That's
good.
Yeah, that's cool.
But the problem I think is that if you do it too big, then there's also like cohesion stuff, and you have to think about like the history of that world to make it seem realistic, and then you have to think about like, well, how would these like cities interact? I mean, have they gone to war? Do they like each other? Do they, whatever? And then I just get bogged down in so much stuff. I try to make it seem realistic, but then sometimes I get like too like focused in, because I'm like, well, what type of crops would this biome have? And then I'm like, who gives a shit? I can just call it like frost grain, and if I don't want it to sound like frost grain, I'll just throw it in a translator and come out with like a cool name, that sounds like, and I don't have to like look up what people grow in Norway to make it seem realistic, I guess.
But I think those little details are cool. Like you have those in your world. It's like, yeah, what do the people eat here? Because people in a game, they want to go to the tavern and they want to eat, and the tavern owner will tell them of the specials. And being able to say we have frost grain with turnips or whatever is like, oh, cool. Instead of the tavern, something more generic, a little touch like that. I think those little ingredients can go a long way. And especially when you're building your own custom world, I think those are great.
So to clarify, you're pro if a party wants to go have lunch somewhere. You're pro giving them
definitely.
a menu. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, I think that adds to the whole. I mean, and that also, I think that also facilitates. I'm pretty into like intrigue type of stuff. I like combat as much as the next person, but I don't want like my whole session to get bogged down in a 4-hour, combat session or whatever all of the time. And so one of the things that I try to promote is, intrigue between nations or whatever, and like, are you a convoy or an envoy for this nation? Are you an adventurer that's like so powerful and esteemed or whatever that like a king would take notice of you, and therefore like how would you like come into play in like political situations? Like would they are you like pro this kingdom, or are you like anti whatever the establishment is for in this town? Do you want to go somewhere else? I mean, and then if you are an envoy, like and then you get sent to like this other city and you have to like learn their culture or whatnot, and then like, oh, maybe the king invites you in for a banquet or whatever. And I think that really facilitates like role playing, and that's like the name of the game, right? I mean, that's what you want those moments where the characters are learning new things and they're interacting with each other and they're making decisions, and I think that if you don't have enough of that, then people end up doing a lot of metagaming, because people want to make decisions and they want to feel like they are affecting change in their world.
Yeah.
And if they don't get enough opportunities to do it in role play, then they're going to start doing it in combat, and you don't really want them like, well, what should I do in this next action or whatever. And
yeah. I love that of like how when you provide moments for a character to be able to tell their story, individualize themselves, like be engage in the world outside of combat, then it doesn't put that pressure on combat, which can then like speed up combat. That's cool. I like that.
Totally.
I mean, I think there's another good question from Clooney McRoy in the chat about like, do you because I struggle with this. I love this Wikipedia rabbit hole that you're describing about, like, reading about the corn in Norway, because it's a fun way to spend a Saturday. But you're right, it's a dangerous wormhole. I know I'm way too much about nebulas now because I was just like trying to figure out how to talk about what they are. But what do you feel like you do to make sure that the story, and especially as someone who's writing this, like as you're someone who's writing something to like give to other people to use, what do you do to take the big world and then engage the 5-player table of adventurers with it?
I think that something that's important, or at least like my design goal when I like started my project, and just like my design philosophy as a DM, is that you should have as much of that stuff. I want it to be like a sandbox, right? I mean, that's why people play D&D most of the time. I mean, I don't know. That's how I've always played it. I don't generally do. It always turns into a sandbox anyway, even if you play the pre-written stuff. I mean, it's difficult to keep players on track. But I think that my goal was to have it as much of a sandbox, but also as much like offloaded for that next DM as possible. So like if they're like, oh, I'm in Damfholm or whatever, that's the Magitech like steampunk city, they can just look up like what I've written as far as like, oh, this is what they eat, or this is what they like dress like.
Yeah.
And then they don't have to like spend 3 hours pre-gaming for it by doing that Wikipedia hole themselves.
Right.
And so I think I just need to learn when is enough, and how much is how realistic does it really need to be versus like it's a fantasy world, you can just make it up. I think there is a balance there.
Because when you read in the published books like the Adventures for 5e, they don't go down that rabbit hole. They don't expand that much on the stuff, at least not in the ones that I've read. They definitely leave a lot of it up to the DM to answer some of those questions for that. We got another good question in chat. Let me scroll past some of the mustache nonsense.
It better not be Uncle Brenner's question about chips either, because I've learned a lot about nautical terms. Thank you very much. Okay.
This question is from Aaron Gabbo. When do you think a homebrew is ready to release to the world? Either release just on like DM's Guild or on Reddit or on like a Kickstarter or something. Like what do you think? What are you looking for in your project that you'd be like, okay, this is ready? Because you just kind of like hinted at it. Like if you make Damfholm super, super intricate as a city and a world, every city that you do after that, you would kind of be expected like, well, what are they eating over in this city? Like how are they dressing in this city? So you kind of, I mean, you can like delete stuff and make it simple again. But I'm just curious, like for you personally, and I struggle with this myself. I'll work a bunch on building something, and then I just kind of like walk away into another project.
Please God, tell me and Andrew, because we just have pages of PDFs of stuff we've both been working on. I know for a fact. So.
Yeah, I think I might be the wrong person to ask about that because I mean, I've been working on this for like several years, and I'm still like every year.
You even commissioned cool art for it. This project, you have done more work on this project than any homebrew project I've seen. Like you commissioned there's some very cool art that looks like it could come right out of the pages of a published 5e book.
Thank you.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, I guess I wasn't asking you, and isn't like someone who has released it, but just for you personally, like what would be? Do you have like an idea of when you'd be like, ding, now it's time. It's time to go to.
You finished at least one thing in this setting.
Release, right? I mean, I have a roadmap that I've written out, and an outline of what I want to get done. I think I don't know. It's difficult because you also, when you're building a world, and then for me, a lot of the things that have like held me back has been like, well, I can't add a whole city later because like the city would change the geopolitical structure of the whole area. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you can't just like put a city on this map and then, nobody talked about it until now. Like that's like
You
been
just
one
call
of
it
the
the
things.
Lost City.
Yeah, I do have a lost city,
Yeah.
but I've
Guys,
taken it into account. Like people
that's a good point. It might like crack although I think people would be they'd be like, oh cool, there's a new region, to be explored or something.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've tried to do is just make what I have like pretty isolated, because then it's like, well, if there is stuff outside of there, there's either natural barriers or like monster barriers that keep people from traveling
yeah.
across this land, and then word doesn't come back, and then you're easier to release that. But I mean,
And in my experience, players only like trekking if they have a destination. I've never run into a group that's like, we're going south and we're not, and that's it. South every game. We walk south until we find the ocean. Like they wanna have a place that they're walking to.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they also a lot of times don't really like the actual journey. They want to just like be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Well, we have a roll table. If you could roll your d20,
Yeah,
hit up a question on the roll table.
14.
14. All right.
14.
What's 14 on 2021's
Is
feel bad.
there
roll table?
Like
is
I have
there
actually,
a
yes.
player class that you can't stand DMing for, that you wish you'd never see again?
A class?
And we'll say 5e Dungeons and Dragons class.
Not really. I like all the classes in 5e. There's a few in 4e I didn't really like that I
What?
thought were pretty useless.
What are the ones that pop into your head?
Like they had an Avenger class in 4e that I thought was
Like Iron Man?
it sounded cool, but
That does seem OP.
it was basically like the Avenger class was like a Assassin's Creed character or something. Like
Okay.
that. And they just weren't very good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a class that I wouldn't.
You like
that
them
I
all?
don't. Yeah, I like all the classes. I think they did a good job. And
I don't like rogues. I feel like rogues are, and I feel this as a player too, they're too formulaic in a fight. It's just like, I take my cunning action, I hide, I sneak attack. It's just like the same cycle.
Yeah.
And for me, it always makes the combat weird because they are supposedly hidden. But if you were in a fight and you got shot with a crossbow in the back of your neck, would you not turn and go find that person? But a rogue is like, no, I rolled higher. You can't find me, even though we're in an alley and there's one barrel to hide behind. It always yanks me out of the immersion of the combat with the rogues. The whole mechanic of them just hiding to sneak attack every time. That's my least favorite, I think.
I get that. Yeah.
I don't know. To quote Tina Fey, you're trying to bring logic to the robot versus bear fight sketch, which is, I mean, I say that with tongue in cheek because I love the process of walking through exactly what you're talking about. But I don't know, man. I feel like I've seen annoying people play my favorite class and great people play my least favorite class, and I like them all. So Dylan, I've DM'd for Dylan, as you know, because you all play in that game together, where you're a polearm master, and that shit drives with a halberd, and it drives me crazy. There's someone in one of my other games like that too, and it makes it so I move. He's like, well, is it if you cut to the two squares, does that mean I get an attack of opportunity? And now it can't move throughout the board? It drives me crazy. But you know what? You're a very fun player to play with. Your character's very good. And you don't make me feel bad when you all crush my monsters. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I think a lot of that shit talk is get out of here. Get out of here with the mechanic thing. Just stop being annoying. So That's my.
Yeah, I think I'd have to know more about like all of the subclasses to really have a gripe. I mean, all of the greater, the macro classes or whatever you want to call them, like the actual classes. I think they're all good. I miss prestige classes, even though that's what subclasses are. But I thought prestige classes were cool.
Yeah. Man, I'm just going off here, but I want us to figure out, the three of us, I know, Dylan, you also watch the show, you're in the chat. I want us to, on the dungeon this year, figure out how to end something. Yeah. Like, let's figure out how to, like, be done with something. Guys, I feel like we talked to Stephen Dewey about it. We talked to multiple people who make stuff about, like, how to be done, and I feel like that answer is always kind of like open-ended.
It seems to be the curse of the game master, is if you get an idea and then you just, I think it's the open-ended nature of the games themselves. You can sit there and think about your game for the rest of your life and you'll have some new idea for it. You will never, because you are building a whole world, so you can be like, oh no, I just thought another idea. They don't use coins in this city. They use these colored stones instead. You will never, because that's what makes tabletop role-playing games so cool, is because they have no boundaries to work in. So yeah, it is very hard. I almost feel like you need somebody who doesn't like tabletop role-playing games at all to partner up with. And they're just like, here's the schedule. When you get to this date, this is going out into the world in whatever state it's in. And if it's half-baked and shitty, that's because you left it in that state.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, well, that's one answer that we have so far this year. Just hire someone to yell at you.
So if any of you know an assistant manager that's looking for some side work.
I tried doing something like that a few years ago, actually. I quit my job and was like, I'm going to put this out. And then I didn't, and then I had to find a new job.
It's like, another
I'm quitting my job, and I'm going to do this full time, and then I'm going to do it. And that was
somebody said
3 years ago.
Do it by city, and yeah, that's what Dylan was working on. Maybe like a Patreon or something set up where it's like every month you get a new city with like I mean, there's so much stuff, religions, all this stuff. So. Yeah.
So go put your game out, figure it out for us, Dylan, and then come back and let us know.
That could be our friendly goal for 2021, to finish, to find the mythical end of something, of a project.
Sounds good.
Totally. Well, thanks for doing the show, Dylan.
Thanks for having me.
So glad we finally got you on here. And when you have finished Elegy of Ages, we will have you back so we can really dive into it and give people like a cool preview of it.
Find out exactly what that frost corn is. I want to know. I want to know.
This is just regular grain. And thanks everybody in chat. Good questions. Thanks for coming back in 2021. It's nice to be back.
Yeah.
It's fun to chat with people.
It's super fun to hang out. Dylan, I'm glad that we started this horror show of a year off, right? By getting to hang out and talk about weird games with our friends. So yeah, thanks everybody in chat. A reminder, if you're watching this and you don't know, Andrew and I play in a Spelljammer, a 5e. Well, I'm messing up my own game. Here we go. Take two. I'm going to do that.
Harlan runs a great 5e Spelljammer.
I talk for a long time, and I say all the words in the right order.
That I'm a player in. It's called Better Than Heroes every Monday night at 7 p.m. Pacific. It's a bunch of fun. And we're in our story arc 2, and yeah, it's a cool game. If you aren't familiar with it, check that out. We have a Patreon for that too. If you want to play Dungeons and Dragons with us, called Repos and Leads. That's coming up this Sunday. That's always a very fun game. As well. And that kind of goes back to what Dylan was saying of playing in the history of another game. The Repos and Leads game exists in the Better Than Heroes universe, so you get to explore the aftermath of events that would normally never get coverage in a Dungeons and Dragons game, but you get to see that in that, which I think is very fun and a neat twist on a game.
Yeah, we're digging in because I want to put out Firma Regna this year. So just a little spoiler. And so
Harlan's working on Firma Regna campaign guide. Just has to get finished.
Just has to get finished. I've been working on it for so long. Okay, cool. See, we don't even know how to end the episode. We can't end anything.
Yep. But thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next week, next Thursday.
Yeah. Thanks, Dylan. We'll see y'all later.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can't end the show. I can't end the show on OBS right now. We're stuck.
The button's not working.
We're stuck.